Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another webinar with Connecting Up. My name is Christine. You probably haven't heard me back online for a while, but it's good to be back. Today we have Ryan Jones, who will be presenting about Microsoft Office 365 for not-for-profit. Today's webinar will specifically be about an introduction and overview of what Office 365 is, and also will be showing a few demonstrations of the various features available. For your information, we also do have the second step webinar or the next step webinar on 365 where it talks about planning for implementation and migration, and this will be held next week. I will provide more information at the end of the webinar if you're interested. But just a few housekeeping notes before I hand you over to Ryan. If you're new to our webinars, just to let you know that if you have any questions, please type them in the question box and we will address them as we go along. We are trying to make it as interactive as possible, so if you do have anything you would like to ask, please feel free to send them along. This is also being recorded, so you can access the recording afterwards, and the slides will be sent to you via email as well. So that's all from me. I will hand you over now to Ryan as he has a fair bit to go through. Over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Christine, and welcome everyone to the webinar. Thanks for joining us. So today we're basically going to go through what Office 365 is, what some of the things that you can do with it are, and then go into a bit more information about the offer that Microsoft have made available to non-profits. If you've got any questions throughout the webinar, let us know and we'll go through it as best we can. And I'm sure we'll be able to improve your understanding of 365. So today what you can see here is I'm actually presenting from 365 using PowerPoint Online. So what is 365 itself? Just get my next slide. So 365 is basically Microsoft Office in the cloud. So here I'm using PowerPoint Online. It's got a very similar feature set and very similar display to Office on the desktop. The main difference being that my file is stored in the cloud. So I guess the big question that a lot of people ask is, why would I want to do that? Why would I want Office in the cloud? There are a couple of key reasons why this is useful. One of the big things is flexibility. So being able to add users and scale if you suddenly get a grant and experience a lot of growth without having to buy new servers. So often I talk to organizations that if they add a single more user to their on-premise server, it'll explode. And with 365 you no longer have that concern. You can add users for different calendar sharing without actually having to add people. You have a lot of flexibility and you have a lot of peace of mind knowing that you can do that. One of the other big things is the reliability. So Microsoft have got a service level agreement on Office 365. It's guaranteed service. The 365 is all hosted across multiple data centers. But the big thing here is automated backups. I don't know how everybody on the webinar today is backing up at the moment, but I've seen everything from organizations that just don't, through to physical drives that stay on the premise. This way you know that your data is being backed up in a secure location and you don't have to worry about backing up, securing files, things like that. I guess the other big benefit here is that it's always up to date. Anybody who's ever had to upgrade a server from an older version of Small Business Server, or you have to upgrade to the new version of Exchange, these are things that you don't have to do anymore because Microsoft take care of all of them in the cloud. So the big thing around that is peace of mind. You know that you can add users without causing yourself any hassles. You know that your data is backed up and the system's going to be reliable, and you know that it's always going to be up to date. So what can we do with all of that? Well, our data is available wherever we are. So we can access it wherever we want it on whatever device we want to use. There are Office 365 apps available for Windows, Android and iOS phones. There are apps available for tablets, your desktop computers. You can just log in through a web browser like I'm doing at the moment. It's available wherever you are. It also means that you've got centralized document storage. So I'll own up. Connecting Up is one of those organizations that has the X drive, and I'm sure some of you on the call have got a similar situation. Some of you might call it the J drive or the Z drive or whatever it is, but you've got all your documents stored there and you can't find them. Using Office in the cloud, you get access to SharePoint and OneDrive for Business, which allows you to set up centralized document storage with versioning of all your files and with automated backups. So that's a really powerful feature and really useful feature. And the other thing is you don't need to run your own servers. So some of these features that are in Office 365, which we'll go through a bit more in detail in a minute about hosted servers, these were out of reach of a lot of small organizations only a few months ago. With Office 365, Microsoft are giving it to you for free, and all of a sudden you can have access to enterprise-grade infrastructure that would otherwise be unaffordable.
So Ryan, we have a quick question here from Peter because you mentioned about backup before. Can we get a copy of the backup if we need to?
Yes. Depends on what you are trying to get and what you're trying to get it for. Versioning is really easy. You can just roll back any file if somebody accidentally deletes the contents of the file or something silly, you can go back. But yeah, you can do that. All right. So now we know why we want it. So what is Office 365? It's basically Microsoft Office in the cloud. We went through that. But you get web-based versions of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote. A couple that you don't get, that I get asked all the time, you don't get a copy of Publisher. Publisher isn't available as part of 365 just yet, and you don't get a copy of Access. It is still possible to store Access and Publisher files in your OneDrive for Business, but at this stage it's not possible to access them online. There are some workarounds for Access, but I won't go into those today. Now, the benefit of having everything stored in the cloud is that you can work collaboratively on documents. The example here that lots of organizations mention to me is grant writing. And everybody, when they're doing a grant application, always inevitably things have to be done at the last minute. And in some cases, at the moment, what that means is cutting that document up into different pages, into different sections, into different paragraphs, emailing them around the office and asking different people to work on different bits, and then somebody has to be that nominated person to put it all back together. With Office 365, what you can do is you can store that document on OneDrive and you can all edit it at the same time, which is a massive speed benefit when you're working on a tight deadline. And it also allows you to be able to see what other people are writing in real time so that you can match the writing style, or you can not double up, or whatever is important to you at the time. One really cool feature is the ability to pick up where you left off on documents on different devices. So if I'm working on a Word document on my computer at work, and then I need to continue work on that document on my way home on my tablet, I can open that document up. I don't have to question where I was in the document because it's already there, and I can pick up and carry on. Of course, you've also got access to mobile apps for a range of different Office 365 services. But to me, the big thing about Office 365 is these hosted servers in the cloud. These are a great benefit to organisations that weren't available previously in a lot of cases. In other cases, they're just so much easier to use now than having your old on-premise server that it makes your life easier. So here, the free server products without the hardware is the big game changer. These are the powerhouse of Office 365. So you don't need physical hardware anymore, you don't need your on-premise server, as it's all completely hosted. These are easy to set up, and you've got access to these enterprise level service, backup and updates that would otherwise not be available. The servers that are available are SharePoint, which provides you with an online intranet for internal use in your organisation. You can set up team sites for different projects that you're running, and you can also run a public website if you don't have a public website at the moment. The big one is Exchange for professional email and calendaring. So if you don't have shared calendars at the moment, they're a massive benefit. Being able to know when Christine's in a meeting and schedule meetings around hers is a big benefit for us as an organisation. But the other thing that's really popular is using Exchange shared calendars for physical assets. So for example, if we want to book our meeting room, we have limited meeting spaces at the Connecting Up office. If we want to book the meeting room, there's a shared calendar for that, and we can book it for a time that won't conflict with somebody else's meeting. There are organisations I speak to who take that a step further, and they also use that shared calendar for cars in a carpool, for data projectors, laptops. There are a whole range of things that you can then allow staff to book out at will. You've also got access to OneDrive. So we were talking about that before, but the big thing here is that you've got a terabyte of space per user. A terabyte. Somebody told me the other day that that is, on the size of an average Word document, it's something like 4 million Word files. So you've got as much space as most users would need, and at the end of the day when you run out of space, I'm sure by that point Microsoft would have increased the limit. They've only just increased it. And Link, which is a product that a lot of organisations haven't heard about before, but Link is almost like a private version of Skype. It allows your organisation to have access to instant messaging, high definition audio and video conferencing, screen sharing, all those things that you can do in Skype, but the twist being that when you share screens, you can actually request control over it. Perfect example in our office is I do a lot of work in Excel, and I'm not very good at formulas, and we have a couple of people here that are awesome at Excel formulas. We can start a link conversation, and I can just say, hey, can you just quickly help me with this formula? And they can request control of my computer and make that change. But I can limit their access to my computer to Excel so that they can't go and read my email or do something else like that. So it's all very secure. A couple of questions?
Yes. Firstly, regarding that whole OneDrive 1 terabyte per user, we have two questions ultimately the same. So if that's 1 terabyte per user, if they have, say, an X number amount of users of 5 or 10, does that mean that total data storage is totally available to the organization? So if it's 10 users, that means 10 terabytes. 5 users means 5 terabytes?
In theory it does, but the space is allocated per user. So each user has a terabyte, and how that's divvied up depends on how your organisation sets up Office 365. But if you've got 10 staff, then you've got 10 terabytes total. but each user can only store 1 terabyte. Sometimes if you can have one user with 8 terabytes of storage, and then you split the remaining 2 terabytes amongst all your other users.
Another question was to do with the editing document. So this is a question from Anna. So if you can all edit one document at the same time, how do you know someone is in there editing it? Will it track changes?
It's really useful actually because they put little markers in the text of the email. So it'll show you that somebody else is, in the text of the document. It'll show you that there are other users working on the document, and there'll be little markers in the document that will show you where they're working on. And to prevent issues around conflicts, it will lock you out of the paragraph that another user is working on. And it tells you that. The other cool thing that it can do is you can do that whether you're working on Office Online or whether you're working on Office 2013 on your computer. So Office 2013, you can use all the features of the desktop program, but it still knows which paragraph somebody else is editing, and you can sync it and update with all the changes.
A few questions here on going back just to the terabyte on OneDrive. What if your user number drops and you are at maximum storage? Do you have to then delete documents?
Yes, but if your staff are leaving and that's why you're dropping the users, then you need to, I guess you need to question whether you need to use all of that space. I mean, a lot of organisations would only be using that level of space if they were using it for graphic assets and video assets, and in a lot of cases they should be stored locally anyway just for speed. A local hard drive is always going to be a bit quicker than dealing with an internet connection.
I might just ask a few questions regarding link, and we do have quite a lot more, but I might continue the presentation after this. I might get you to do the presentation.
We will talk a bit more
about link shortly.
Alright, so should we just continue on? Okay.
Sure. Now the only other point that I want to make here, I'm surprised no one's asked it already. Office 365, all of these servers, all of this cool technology, it's not a I've signed up for Office 365 and I have to use all of it scenario. You can pick and choose what you want to use. So in the case of some organisations, it might be baby steps, and you might migrate your email to Exchange, get access to the email and the calendaring, the shared inboxes, and that might be all you do in 365 at the moment. And you might choose to change, you might decide in 6 months, I've heard a lot about this link, I think that would be really useful to our organisation, can we add that as well? Well, yes, it's just a matter of turning it on and configuring it. You might decide that you want to use SharePoint, you want to set up some internal websites for different projects that you're using, but you don't want to replace your public website. Well, you don't have to. You can just do your team sites without doing the public website. And of course, OneDrive is optional as well. So that's the really great thing about this. If you're using Exchange email already, you can use Exchange email in the cloud, you can migrate it, but you don't have to do any one particular piece of Office 365. And the other thing is I've said a lot about your ability to replace your on-premise servers. You don't need on-premise servers. That's a bit general. Some organisations will still want to keep an on-premise server for whatever reason. You have the ability to do that, and you also have the ability to sync Active Directory with 365. That's a bit outside the scope of this webinar, but if you go to next week's webinar with Marcus, he'll go into that in a bit more detail. So, what I want to talk about now is we're going to talk quickly about OneDrive for Business, but I've got Exchange, Link and SharePoint coming up as well. So if you've got questions on Exchange, Link and SharePoint, just save them until those slides and we'll go through them then all at the same time. So with OneDrive for Business, you have 1 terabyte of cloud storage per user. You can access your files from any web browser. You can synchronize them with your desktop, but you can choose different folders that you want to synchronize with your desktop. If you have a terabyte of cloud storage, it may be that you've got an Ultrabook or a little laptop that only has a 256 gig hard drive. So you can choose just to sync certain folders, and it might be that you need to sync those folders before you jump on a plane and head over, from Sydney to Perth or something. Long amount of time that you want to have the files on you. So you can sync that folder, and you've got the versioning there so that you don't have conflicts when you arise, and you can sync them back up when you're done with them. So I'm not 100% sure at this stage how some of these examples that we had before in terms of having 10 users that are using their full terabyte, but I would be surprised if that's a usual case. A lot of people request things like storing video assets. You can store whatever files you want pretty much on OneDrive, but the thing to remember is that you can only use Office Online with documents that Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote can open. So if you store, say, Adobe Premiere projects on there, the benefit there is that it's backed up, not necessarily that you've got access to it in the cloud. Okay. So next up we've got Exchange Online. So for anyone that's already using Exchange, for anyone that's already using Outlook, this will all be very familiar to you, I hope. So Exchange Online is powerful web-based email. It's really useful for being able to, you get some added benefits over a normal email in terms of communicating with your colleagues, things like that. But you don't have to use the webmail. You can use Exchange with Outlook, which is the case for a lot of organizations. They're already using an Exchange server of some description on premise and using Outlook to talk to that Exchange server. Now the only difference is that you'd be migrating your Exchange server to Office 365, and just instead of connecting to your local server, you're connecting to the 365 server. The other big benefit here is the shared calendars, which, like I said before, can really help you manage your meeting rooms. Being able to know when your colleagues are in meetings and when they're not in meetings is really useful, because it means that, especially if you've got to line up a meeting with, say, 5 other people, sometimes finding a time can be tricky. Being able to see when they're free and book something in accordingly is really useful. But the other thing that you can do is you've got different levels of privacy settings on your shared calendars, and internally at Connecting Up we share all of our appointments. So I can see if Christine's in a meeting that I'm involved in as well, but I need to organise another meeting that's probably a bit more important that week, I can see that she's going to be in that meeting, and I can say, hey Christine, do you think you could postpone that meeting because this is the only time I can get all 5 people around a room. So it makes it a lot easier to have those conversations. You get 50 gigabytes of storage per user for Exchange inboxes, and you've got access via mobile apps, the same as you do now. So if you're using Exchange from a mobile phone, Exchange support is really good in Windows Mobile and in iOS. I'm not 100% sure about Android, but I'm sure somebody can let me know. So it's really good support for the calendars as well on your mobile devices. So you can pick up your mobile phone and you can see what appointments you've got on for the day. You can check your email on the go. It's really useful for that. And it's also really secure. Microsoft makes sure that all of your Exchange is set up and secure, which makes your life a bit easier. Now, I guess this is where 365 really comes into its own. This is where you really start to get features that you may not necessarily have at the moment. So because Link and Exchange are both part of Office 365, they can talk to each other. So what that means is, wouldn't it be great if Skype would tell you when your colleagues were actually online and when they weren't online? With Link, you can get that real-time presence information. Now, this picture over here on the side, you can see here that the first person on the left has a red bar next to their photo. Now, what that means is he's in a conversation at the moment, or he's in a meeting, and so I know that I can't talk to him because he's busy. And by the look of the pictures, he's probably in this video conversation here. This guy here, he's got a green bar there, which tells me that he's not in a meeting, he's at his computer, and if I want to talk to him, I can start a conversation, I can start a video chat by clicking the video chat icon, I can start a phone call, I can ask him before I do that. So that's all really easy. But this lady over here with the yellow bar next to her picture, what that means is that her calendar, her Exchange calendar tells Link that she doesn't have any appointments at the moment, but she hasn't touched her computer in the last 15 minutes. So there's a high probability that she might have gone out for lunch, she might be down at the coffee shop, she's left her computer for whatever reason. So I could try talking to her, but it's unlikely that she'll respond. So having that direct link to Exchange gives me the power to be able to see, okay, my colleagues are busy, my colleagues aren't busy, I can have a conversation, which makes it a lot easier to facilitate staff that might be working off-site, traveling, teleworking, those kind of things. You can take this a step further, and there are mobile apps available for Windows Phone, Android and iOS. So all of a sudden, the first person in that row of icons, Brian, I can ring him from my phone over Link. So there's no phone charges there. There's obviously data charges if I'm connected to a data network and not Wi-Fi, but I can ring him over the internet with no call charges, which is really handy if you're traveling overseas, you're using Wi-Fi at a hotel, you can ring Brian and have a conversation with him without having to worry about the call charges. You can then have high-definition group chats with up to 5 different people, depending on your internet connection speed. So that's good for getting different teams in different locations around the same table. And you can instant message the same as most other platforms, and you can voice chat as well. You can do video chat from your phone if that's something that you want to do. And then you go into the really powerful features like the screen sharing and the virtual whiteboard. The screen sharing, I gave the example before about taking control of the computer. It's kept really secure because, first of all, it's within your organization, so only your colleagues can do that. You have to give them permission to be able to share your screen. You have to give them permission to control your screen, and you can also limit their access to your computer based on the program or the window that you want them to have access to. So again, the example is Excel. You might just want somebody to edit a formula for you. You can invite external people to join via the Link web app. And the other cool thing that you can do is if the external people are in an area that, this is Australia or New Zealand, you may not have particularly good internet access, they can dial in. There's local dial-in numbers for Link for most local areas. Do we have any
Christine?
questions, Christine?
Yes, we have a few questions on link. Some of them must have been slightly addressed, but a little bit more specific. So these are from Elisa and Ken. So you talked about it being restricted to users in your organization. Well, can you then set up a video conference with users who are users of Link with another organization, or maybe even users who do not have Link at all?
Yeah, you can invite external people and just like most other conferencing systems really, if you've used things like GoToMeeting, there's ID codes, passwords, things like that that you can give out to people, and you can invite external people. We quite regularly at Connecting Up will have a call with Microsoft staff, and the Microsoft staff are obviously on Microsoft's Office 365 instance, but they can send us an invite and we can join their call, no problems.
And that call will also allow screen sharing. So say if you organize or you host a video conference and you have Link but I don't have Link, I can still see that screen sharing feature?
Yeah, depending on your security settings. Again, you've got the ultimate control over that.
Right. Another question, is that possible to have screen sharing on mobile? And this is a question from Nians.
You can view the screen on mobile, but whether you can share a mobile screen is a really good question. I'd have to check that out for you. Sorry about that.
Great. Another question on Link, voice and HD video chat. Would you need a separate network line that's separate for you from your data line from Rini?
If you're looking at replacing your telephone lines with Link, that becomes a much more complicated question depending on how you want to set it up. So I'd say that that would be a question for your specific circumstances, depending on your line speed and how many people you've got accessing it. So that's a question best for whoever's helping you with the implementation.
That's basically all the questions I have for Link. I have quite a fair bit of questions going back to the OneDrive and things. So first of all, with the data storage of 1 terabyte, how do you handle security across the organization? For example, user 1 and 2 only can edit document but not user 3 and 4.
You have access to limit people's access or give people access to what they need on the OneDrive. It's basically how you set it up. But yeah, I could give people read-only access, or I could give people full write access. It's totally down to how I want to set it up and how I want to configure it.
If you remember the scenario earlier that was presented about, so if we have 5 users, does that mean we have a total of 5 terabyte of data access? You mentioned about it depends on what access you give each users. All the documents, what if the documents aren't necessarily owned by users? They're all across the organizations, they're all system shared by all staff, there's no one owner.
In that case, you could create an admin user that ultimately owns all of the files and then control the access that way. But you would run into difficulties then if you had more than 1 terabytes worth of files that you wanted to store there. Then you might want to break it into teams. You might want to break it into... Well, one thing that you can do with SharePoint is you can have your team sites. So you can run them by project, or you can also run them by team, or however you want to configure them. So it might be that your marketing team, they have ultimate ownership over their OneDrive assets, but they have a OneDrive for the shared marketing inbox, the shared marketing team site. And what that means is people can email files to the marketing team and everybody will see them at once. And there's also that shared 1 terabyte of storage for people on the marketing team that is not necessarily needed by the rest of the organization, but it can be shared across.
So leading on from that question, Suzanne would like to know a little bit more about the difference between SharePoint and OneDrive.
SharePoint is basically like a website. Not sure if anybody on here has used things like Basecamp, but OneDrive, SharePoint can be used to set up public-facing internet sites. It's a content management system in that regard. So you can set up a public-facing website that has different pages that can easily be accessed in the back end. You can theme it to look like your own website. All the things that you can do on a lot of the other popular content management systems like Drupal, Joomla, WordPress, all those kind of things, actually. That was my next slide. So the public website's really useful, particularly for organisations that don't have a website or have a really outdated website and want to update it. Again, you don't have to use it for your public website, but you can if you like. The other thing that you can do with SharePoint, though, is you can have these online work sites for collaboration. So the site can be issued with its own shared email address. So, you know, I was saying before about the marketing team, but it works just as effectively if you get a grant to deliver a certain program. That grant site can have a site email address where all of the necessary items, emails, whatever about that project get stored, and everybody working on that project has access to them. You can set up a OneDrive storage as part of that. So I guess that's where that link comes in. SharePoint is the website, OneDrive is the storage, but you can have a separate OneDrive set up for that SharePoint project, work sites, whatever you want to call it. Then you can also have different tasks and timelines set up. So, you know, if you've got got a grant project, you've got a series of things that you have to do to activate that grant, you can then use that, track everything that goes on, which allows you to really improve your reporting later on to your grant funders, because it's all documented, it's all tracked, it's really easy to access. Now, Marcus will go through this in a bit more detail next week, but there are some examples that he can show you on websites that are built in SharePoint. They don't all have to look exactly the same. They can be themed just like any different site. But you can customize it quite heavily. It's like a lot of things. The thing with SharePoint is that it can do a lot, but that's also the bad part about SharePoint, that you can do almost anything. So it's down to what your organization actually needs and what SharePoint can help you with. And, you know, like with anything in Office 365, set up what you need, set up what you have a need for, and then add new features as the need arises.
In the interest of time, should we just continue on to a brief demo first before we address all the remaining questions? Would you prefer to?
What we might do then is go through the last couple of slides and then answer any remaining questions.
So what we've got on the next slide. So the last couple of slides are basically the exact offer that Microsoft are making available. So the Office 365 that we're talking about here that non-profits and charities have access to is the Enterprise E1 plan. So this is a plan that they make commercially available to any large enterprise that needs it. It's just that they're making this available specifically for charities as well. So what you get on the E1 plan is Office Online, Exchange Online, OneDrive for Business, Link, SharePoint, all those things we've already talked about. Active Directory integration. So anyone who uses Active Directory and needs the integration, you can do that with Office 365 Enterprise. Yammer Enterprise, which is kind of like a Facebook, Twitter, social media style application for your organization, where you can have quick polls on things and decide on lunch locations, things like that. And you also get 24/7 phone support. Now Microsoft are making the E1 plan available free for non-profits and charities, so there's no cost per user per month, and so that's where the real benefit here is. All of these servers that would have cost significant money to implement in the past, you've now got access to for free. Now, just quickly though, there is a Enterprise E3 plan. Now, what you see here is there's a couple of things that are here that weren't on the other slide. One, namely, the desktop apps and the mobile apps. So, if you need the desktop software, you don't have it already, then E3 provides that and also provides access to the mobile apps. But the important thing to note here is that Office 2013 is the desktop apps. If you already have Office 2013 in your organization, then you don't need to upgrade to E3 just to get the desktop apps. You can also request a donation of Office 2013 through the donations program, and that will get you access to the desktop apps as well. But some of the other benefits of the E3 plan are some advanced email features around archiving. There's an e-discovery center, there's advanced voice features for Link, and there's some business intelligence functions. So there is a slight cost for E3, which isn't on that slide. E3 is around about $4.50 US per user per month, and it comes down to what your organization needs. We are offering Office 365 readiness assessments through the discounts program at the moment, through TechSoup New Zealand. So if you're not sure, we've partnered with another not-for-profit called Info Exchange, who will assess your needs and be able to recommend a particular platform for you. Most non-profits that we meet at the moment, all they need is E1 and possibly Office 2013 as well. So in terms of getting it, you need to get it directly from Microsoft. So microsoft.com/Office 365 nonprofits. We'll send that link out after the webinar, and then away you go. You get a 30-day trial of Enterprise E3, and once you're validated as a nonprofit, then you switch over to the E1 plan, which is free for as long as you need it. So my next slide is just about questions. So we'll go through the rest of those questions now, Christine.
Alright, let's start with some of the more basic ones. So talking about, when you just said about E1 and E3, so you can easily upgrade from E1 to E3 as required per user?
Yes, you can. It can get a bit complicated if you want to have a mix of users, but in general I wouldn't. I would set them up on either E1 or E3, and if you need to upgrade, you can upgrade, but try and this is where things like the readiness assessment come into their own, because you can do that analysis at the beginning and decide on which one's the right one for you.
Now, the next question is more about the Office 365 for NFP eligibility requirement itself. Do you need to be registered? Do you need to have a DGR, or do you need to just be a registered charity?
No.
No. In general, if you qualify for Microsoft donations through Connecting Up at the moment or TechSoup New Zealand, you can access the Office 365 donations program. If you are already registered with us and already qualified, that'll make it a bit easier for you. But you don't have to be a DGR. You don't have to be a DGR to get access to donations through Connecting Up and TechSoup either.
So what happens if someone's, for example, have been on the trial and they've had no response from Microsoft after 2 months and the trial has now expired? They can just register for another one?
You can, but that wouldn't happen. Microsoft have been really good in making sure that everything's followed up.
So in terms of the E1 web-based version of Word, Excel, etc. So E1 only has web-based versions, is that correct? Because someone got confused about saying you need E3 for mobile apps, but they're quite different, aren't they?
Yeah, so E1 has access to all of the web versions, but if you already have Office 2013, it can connect to Office 365. If you don't already have Office 2013, you don't get a license as part of this, so you're restricted to using the web versions. The web versions work quite well across all different platforms, whether that is a Mac, a PC, an iPad, a Surface, even an Android phone. So you can use the web version quite extensively, but if you have that license for Office 2013, you can access all these files on the desktop as well. So then it's just a question of whether you need the Office 2013 license. You can request that as a donation through us, or you can order the E3 tenant, the E3 plan. And like I was saying before, the majority of organisations, all they need is the E1 plan and the upgrade to Office 2013, and that enables all the functionality for them.
So I was wondering, if you already have an Office 365 through its service provider, can they switch to Office 365 Enterprise to reduce costs for NFP?
Not yet. That is something that Microsoft are working on, and I'm not sure who the service provider is, but in Australia, Telstra provide most of the 365. Brian McLaughlin, the Community Affairs Manager for Microsoft, was saying at our conference this year that Telstra will be matching the prices for NFPs. So they haven't exactly worked out the process for that yet. They're working on that at the moment, and hopefully in the next month or so that'll be something that they'll be able to announce.
A few questions here on security and storage and security and privacy. Firstly, you said that users should store documents locally. How do organizations secure the data?
Storing it locally is the same issues that you've got now, I guess, except that you've got the benefit of being able to revoke access to the OneDrive, which revokes access to the files. So it really depends on what the files are that you're storing and how you want to do it. So much of Office 365 comes down to how you implement it. It's able to do almost anything to suit almost any organization, which, like I was saying about SharePoint, it's the good and the bad. It makes questions like that really difficult to answer because it depends on how you do it and depends on how you want it.
So I'm sure this next question has come up a lot in terms of where the data is stored.
Yes, it has. At the moment it is stored in Singapore. Microsoft are working on an Australian data centre, but it was just last week I got an email from IT News telling me that the Australian government had approved data storage offshore. Basically you just need to look at your requirements, look at your contracts and work out whether storing the data overseas is a concern for you. If it is, Office 365 may not be the right solution for you, but I've spoken to a lot of organisations who have found that that's not actually the case and they can store the data offshore. And when Microsoft get that Australian data centre online, I think that will be a big positive.
So what's the guarantee of privacy and security, especially with things like the Heartbleed bug?
No, the Heartbleed bug was a 1 in a million. Yeah, that's a really difficult question. I guess the one thing that constantly comes up when people ask this question is the data is accessible from anywhere, which means that anyone can access the data from anywhere if you don't have good IT policies in place. A perfect example was an organisation I was speaking to about 6 weeks ago. They had had a user leave the organisation. They hadn't changed or revoked any passwords, and that user was able to use the organisation passwords to log in and gain access to some data. Now, if those passwords had been changed, that user wouldn't be able to access that data. You know, if you're enforcing an IT policy where staff have secure passwords, then you're less likely to have people be able to log in and get your files. That's still going to be your weakest link. It's going to be harder to hack into anything if you're using good secure passwords that are changed often. I know how difficult that is to try and enforce, but that's the simple answer. 9 times out of 10, it'll be down to what passwords you use and what policies you've got in place.
What cost is associated with the recovery of backed up data?
Not sure on that one off the top of my head. Most of the backed up data is available for you to access yourself through the Office 365 portal, which makes it a lot easier to do. But in terms of going back to some really in-depth information, that would probably be a question for Microsoft.
Is there any option for two-factor authentication?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there is now. You can enable it, but you've got to set it up.
So next question, we have a hosted server that handles all spam and antivirus. How is this done through Office 365? Do we need to buy and upload an antivirus system?
There are features in Office 365 to do that, but I'm guessing that the server that you've got at the moment that handles antivirus and anti-spam is also hosting email. Is that correct? Okay. 9 times out of 10 organisations are doing it that way because they're hosting email on the same server. I would still recommend that you store, yep, that is the case, yeah, cool. Alright, I'd still recommend that you have antivirus on your computers, obviously, but the mail filtering will become less important because it'll be handled centrally by Microsoft.
Does Exchange Online have public folders? We use them a lot to share access to email.
Yeah, if you're using it at the moment, it should be included in there as well.
Can Office 365 software access local files on our own hard disk storage for editing? So, for example, we have 10 terabyte hard drives with system documents for all users to access or update.
Yeah, okay. In that particular case, what you would probably need to do is upload it to your OneDrive and edit it there and bring it back down. That might be a viable option for you. But in that case, it also might be easier to actually have an Office 2013 client on your computer.
Just quickly going back to the whole editing, multi-user editing that we talked about earlier. So with editing, do you get constant safe conflicts? And also, you mentioned before with Word, you can only edit different paragraphs. But with Excel, is it locked out a cell or worksheet?
Sorry, with I must have muted myself. So going back to the editing questions that we talked about a bit earlier in terms of multi-use editing it. Firstly, with editing, do you get constant safe conflicts? And secondly, with Excel, do they lock out a cell or a worksheet? Because you talked about Word saying that it locks out a paragraph, but with Excel, how does it work?
Well, the first thing is you don't get those save conflicts because it locks you out of the paragraphs. So you don't have people making conflicting changes because you're locked out, because you can't make conflicting changes, which is the great thing, because if Fred's working on the first page of the document and Mary's working on the last page of the document, and through some cloud storage, if they're saved at the same time, there'll be a conflict. But the reality is there is no conflict because they're working on entirely different sections of the document. So when you work on it in Office Online, there's no conflict because they're working on separate sections. If Fred suddenly decides that he wants to work on the last page, well, it tells him that Mary's working on that paragraph and he can't access it, preventing him from making a conflict. In terms of Excel, I suspect it would be worksheet based, but I'd need to confirm that for you.
Does Exchange include tasks?
Yes, but so does SharePoint if you're sharing them.
Okay. Is it possible to provide, say, a volunteer employee with an email address but no access to data or other options? Are there any limits set on the number of email addresses that can be created using their own domain name?
Not at the moment in terms of the limits. But if I want to manage Office 365, if I want to create a new user, I don't want to bulk add users. All right. So I've got a range of different users here that I've got. So you can see that they're all here. There you can see your multi-factor authentication requirements for the person that was asking that question before. You can see Active Directory synchronization, resource mailboxes for things like meeting rooms, shared mailboxes. That's all fine. I've got a user here called Chris, which I set up for our last demo. You can see here that Chris, I'm on an E3 trial here. Chris has access to everything in my Office 365 plan. Well, Chris is a volunteer, so no, I don't want Chris to have access to SharePoint or Office Online or Link or the desktop client in this case because I'm on E3 or Azure, and at the moment I don't have Yammer configured, so I can't disable that. And I can save that. And now Chris only has access to Exchange. In reality, what I would probably want to do is give Chris access to Exchange and Office Online. And what I might want to do is give Chris access to SharePoint, but give him access to his own SharePoint, which would allow him to store files that he works on as a volunteer. And that way, if Chris ever left, I can keep a copy of the files that I might need for whatever purpose. And it also means that I might want to have a volunteer group or a volunteer SharePoint site where all of the volunteers can share the assets that they're working on.
So how many people can change these assigned licenses? Is it only the admin or?
Yeah,
anybody that you configure as an admin. I haven't seen a limitation to how many admins you can have, but realistically, for security reasons, you'd want to limit how many admin users you can have. I can go to Tori. Tori is one of my colleagues. Do I want this user to have administration permissions? Well, Tori works with me, and for example's sake, I might want her to be a user administrator because Tori might be involved in a lot of volunteers and she needs to be able to add volunteer users to the system. I might have our accounts manager might need access to the billing, but obviously if you're on E1 that wouldn't be a major concern. So you can allocate different roles depending on who needs what access. So this is, again, this is where you get the power of Office 365, being able to access all of this in a relatively easy to use format makes it I can even block Tori's access and prevent her from accessing Office 365 at all.
So we assume that this, or is this access control process as easy or very similar for OneDrive, like in terms of accessing folders and access control to folders, etc.?
Yes. So we can go to OneDrive. Because I wanted to demo this today, my computer decided to not play ball before. I'll see whether it's being nice today. No is the answer to my question.
Also, while we're waiting for Ryan to try to work out the demo, just to let you know that we do have a couple more questions online. For those of you who thought you've submitted something but we haven't addressed, just be patient, we'll get to you.
That's all right. We might take a couple of questions at the moment. It looks like my computer's not being nice today. There we go.
Okay, so firstly, a question about integration in OneDrive. Can the AD integration be applied to security on files and folders in OneDrive?
Can the Active Directory...
No, can the AD integration be applied to security on files and folders in OneDrive?
It's getting into a question for next week's webinar. Active Directory is something that we don't touch on a lot in this particular webinar because it's not something that a lot of organisations will still be doing in 365. There are some. I am informed by our IT manager, Pancash, that we will be one of them. And we'll see how that goes. No, my computer's having issues today, so...
Can you use Outlook 2013 as a desktop application while using 365, and if so, how do you set it up?
Yep, you go to Outlook and you create a new account and you just use your 365 server details instead of using your current server details. And you can migrate your existing Outlook over. You've also got access to the web interface, which is this one here, which Microsoft have done a really good job of making this look similar to Outlook on the desktop. So it's easier to access everything straight away.
Brian was saying that they're a small volunteer youth group. They have no central office but distributed locations. Is this an issue?
No.
No, if you're distributed, that makes it really easy to use Outlook. Office 365. Office 365, because you've got it central in the cloud, the most powerful feature is being able to access things wherever you need them, which is particularly useful if you've got a mobile workforce, you've got remote volunteers. Your particular example is pretty much why this was made.
Will I be able to view emails on a phone app and save the PST on my desktop computer?
Not sure about the PST, but you can definitely access things on your phone. We'll do some research into the PSTs because it's the second time it's come up. In general, though, what you would do is you would migrate your email over to 365 and then you wouldn't have to worry about PSTs, but I understand some people have got massive archives and a long history, so that's probably a question for your implementation.
We have a OneDrive account and now OneDrive business account. How do we sync or merge these?
Just pull the data out of your OneDrive account and put it into your OneDrive for Business account. So if you've got them both set up on the desktop, it should be as simple as dragging from one folder to the other and then waiting for OneDrive for Business to sync.
Is the free offer likely to be unlimited as in ongoing?
Everything that I've heard, yes. You know, we don't work for Microsoft, but everyone that I've spoken to at Microsoft says that this is an ongoing offer and something that Microsoft are really proud of. Microsoft have been donating product through Connecting Up, Donatech, TechSoup New Zealand since 2007, and they've donated something like $230 million worth of software in Australia alone. And I think a commitment like that, with that long-term commitment, doesn't suggest to me that they're going to pull the offer anytime soon.
Going back to Exchange, can Exchange email addresses be their own domain name and not a Microsoft.com domain name?
Yeah, the on Microsoft.com domain name, you can see here, I've got my email is on Microsoft.com. That's a temporary domain that Microsoft give you while you're doing your trial. You might have seen before I had a couple of alerts for things that I had to do. One of them was to verify my domain name and set it up. So yes, you can definitely use your own domain name.
So this next question might be more for the implementation webinar, but just to flag it now, I guess it's a question from John. They're a seasonal voluntary media organization that during low season for roughly 6 months, they may have up to 2 staff, but during peak season, they will have up to 7 or 8 staff. What will be the recommended approach to subscribe to Office 365?
Use the E1 plan, and that way it'll scale up and down whenever you need to. You just go into the admin panel and set up your new users.
So final question from Ken. Can IT professionals who provide free support to the not-for-profit sector have an Office 365 account within the organization? I'm not quite clear, Ken, whether you meant within the NFP organization that the IT vendor work with, or are you saying in the actual IT vendor themselves?
If the question is can you set up a admin account so that you have access to the console and you can do everything as an external person, then the answer is yes. And in most cases I suspect that will be what people will do. Depending on your current infrastructure, you'll probably need somebody to help you migrate, and you might need ongoing support as well. So I think a lot of people will do just what you've described. If you're referring to setting up your own organization within an organization, that's not something that would be supported.
Just the last question here from Elisa. What is the upper limit on users under E1?
Have not seen one. There was a mention a while ago of 1,000 users, but I've seen bigger implementations than that, so we haven't hit it just yet.
Great. Well, thanks, Ryan. That was the last of the questions, and we have now come to the end of the webinar. So as I promised earlier, as I mentioned earlier, that we will be having another webinar, which is sort of like the follow-on from today. So if you think that 365 is suitable for your organization, or if you'd like to find out more about how to implement 365 for your organization, feel free to join us for another free webinar next week. The date is the 8th of July at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time as well, and that will specifically talk about what you need to do when planning to migrate and how some implementation tips, etc. So that will be delivered by our partner InfoExchange, who, as Brian mentioned earlier, provides the readiness assessment service. So on that note, I will send a follow-up email after to provide the link to the recording as well as the slides. But if there's any other further question, please feel free to email us as well. And I will email the information for next week's webinar as well if you're interested. Well, that's it for me. Thank you very much again for attending and for all of your questions. I'm sure it has been beneficial for everyone who is attending. And we hope to see you again next week or in our next webinar. Thanks and enjoy the rest of your day.